There's this saying that you don't drown by falling in the water, you drown by staying there. And as a patient and as an advocate for yourself, no one is coming to save you. You have to fight.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the We're Not Stumped podcast. I'm your host, Mike Boland, and today I welcome Kelly Mendenhall to the podcast. Kelly dedicated her career to the services of under-resourced youth and other communities, but in June of 2017, she suddenly lost her mobility almost entirely. And we're going to get into that story today, and I'm sure a lot more with Kelly. But first of all, Kelly, thank you so much for being on the We're Not Stumped podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me. And if I look at the wrong place, not right at the please. Too much neurodivergence. My eyes go where they want to go. I can't help
Oh,
it.
don't worry about it. Most people listen to the podcast. I don't generally watch it, but that's okay. No, it's all good. Thank you. But again, thank you for being here. We
Yeah.
always start the podcast with a segment I call In Your Own Words. So I'd love the listeners to learn more about you because you have a very colorful and diverse life.
It's funny. You're the only one who says colorful like I do. I always say it's been a colorful existence. So yeah, I guess it. So I was born into a very blue collar family in the automotive world in Flint, Michigan. I was born in '82, which is the year that they started shipping all the jobs south. So I was born into the depression of the area, basically. And so the Flint that my mom grew up in, it was very, very different than what I grew up in. And it's a gritty place and it's not an easy place. Uh, but there's like a character shaping that happens when you come from a gritty place. I think Southeast Michigan in general to me is a very we are a tough people. We're like the I don't know. Maybe it's because of all the steel. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's a it's like we're strong and resilient and gritty. Um and in this area. And I think that shaped a lot of how I made it through everything that I made it through. So it's a tough town to grow up in. There was a lot of gang activity and my mom got us out when we were in middle school. And well, when I was in middle school. And um it was bad enough before the water crisis. We went through the gang epidemic that happened in the 80s and 90s. And then I still have family and friends there. So the water crisis was just insult added to injury, you know?
Yeah.
And then it just kept rolling from there. And then all the people who could talk about it got killed or died
Wow.
mysteriously.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
um it's a hard place, but we're tough people and we can be very good at sticking together as a community. So that's kind of where I came from, and that blue collar, proud, dirty hands, clean money type, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Uh my grandfather was an engineer with GM. My dad was a welder with GM. My mom was the very first female supervisor at GM plant when she was 18 years old. That's
Wow.
where her and my dad met. So it runs deep. And my even though growing up in adolescence were really tough, I had a lot of trauma. I In my memoir I talk a lot about that, about my adolescent years. My stepbrothers lived with us and they were on a lot of drugs
Yeah.
and alcohol, mental illness. So my mom and I took the brunt of that, and there was a lot of domestic violence and physical violence. Um, and uh, from there, well, and my dad had passed away almost four.
I did
So
read that. Sorry.
it was kind of like this. I don't know. It's like I'm like a Lemony Snicket. I'm like the series of unfortunate events or something. But there's so much good in between all that. And my mom is an amazing artist, and I didn't find out until this year that, or 2024, the ADHD and possibly autism spectrum disorder. So I'm very much a unicorn, and I'm very creative and artistic, and I was very different than all the other kids. And my mom, no one else could have raised me. God bless her, because um I didn't always make it easy, and we got through all those years. I went to college and grad school because I grew up hearing like you don't want to end up in the shop. You don't want to end up in the shop. You got to go to college. If you go to college, then you can make good money, you can have the American dream, you'll have a good life, it'll be great, and you won't go to the shop. So I went to college. I did my bachelor's in political science, and I did my master's in public administration with certifications in nonprofit management and public
Wow.
personnel management. So I had dreams of grandeur, of being part of the solution from inside the system and like affecting change, with policy and from the inside, and like in caring for, or having the voice for the voiceless to help make change. And I did that so much so that I ran my body and mind straight into the ground.
Oh,
I
wow.
mean, a nonprofit career can really kick it out of you. It's when you're an empath like I am, I call myself a recovering nonprofit professional, because I mean, you really do. Too many of us in the sector, and there's like a culture in that sector of like you're supposed to be there for the love of the mission. So even if you can't pay your bills, and
Yeah.
even if you're struggling with your mental health, you're doing it for the love of the mission. And there's not a lot of talk about like self-care and rest and things like that. You're kind of on call 24/7 with some of the jobs. So that really wore me down
Yeah.
physically and emotionally. And then in 2017, I was working at a therapeutic foster care nonprofit. So, therapeutic foster care is like the foster care for kids who have been removed from their home for neglect, abandonment, or abuse. And it's like the real bad cases. When you work a nonprofit, sometimes I describe it as working the job of two or three people and getting a salary that supports maybe one person. Um, I had a master's degree, and I could raise hundreds of thousands of dollars for organizations through grant writing and stuff. And then I was working with this therapeutic foster care program, and I was like, I was the buffer. I got sick of fundraising because I felt like a cash cow. It was like I was constantly bringing money in for other people for the programs, but I didn't have any say about how it was appropriated or used. And I sometimes I was seeing it used inappropriately, and there was nothing I could do. And I got to the point where I didn't feel good. I felt like a cash cow. And I was
Mm.
like, how am I doing all this for these people who have salaries two and three times bigger than mine? And I can't pay rent and have groceries at the same time. Like it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So I went into therapeutic foster care, and I saw myself as like the buffer. I was responsible for doing the background checks and certifying and training foster parents to work with our kids, our special needs kids. And that was really great sometimes and really awful sometimes. There's some of the secondary trauma you can't help but carry what you find out about what some of those kids go through.
Yeah.
And and it was another situation where I was working unpaid overtime constantly, and for the love of the mission. And all of a sudden, I went from being a person who had aches and pains and took ibuprofen a lot to being the person whose colleagues are like, "Are you good? You've taken
Wow.
ibuprofen like four times today."
Wow.
And in a matter of about 6 months or so, it just got to the point where like suddenly I didn't have any range of motion. I couldn't walk steps because it was such horrific pain to move my legs. And nobody could figure out why. And that had a lot to do with medical gaslighting, which is kind of how I ended up where I am now. So I went through 2.5 years of not understanding what was happening to my body and not being able to solve the mystery, mostly because they didn't believe me. I was called a liar. I was accused of drug seeking when they found out that I wasn't. accepting oxycodone or any narcotic pain medications, then they'd say, "Oh, you must not be hurting that bad then," and it was just like I couldn't win for anything. So 2.5 years into it, I finally see a neurologist, and he has me do like a roadside sobriety test in his office, like you see on cop shows all the
Yeah.
time, and I couldn't pass it. I couldn't touch my nose. I had no balance. I couldn't walk a straight line without falling over. I mean, it was bad. It was bad. And at that point, I was getting vertigo whenever I moved my neck. Like I was getting dizzy. So he said to me, "What have these people been doing to you? I
Wow.
can see that your body is not functioning." And I said, "I don't know, but I just want to know what's wrong and fix it."
Yeah.
And he said, "Why haven't they ever taken full body MRIs, like full spinal MRIs? They only ever looked at my low back and my hips." And I said, "I don't know. I've been begging them for that. I've asked 3 different doctors and specialists for a full spinal MRI and nobody would give it to me."
Hmm.
And he said, "Okay, well, the first thing we're going to do is do a full spinal MRI." And I said, "Can we do my head too? Because I'm scared, because I'm getting dizzy all the time and I'm falling over. And like, what if something's in my brain that I don't know about because of all this?"
Mm-hmm.
So he did. He was like, "I don't think it's your brain, but I'll do the scan because I understand why you need the peace of mind." So we scanned everything, and um I went back in for the follow-up a week or two later, and we talked about the results, and he said, "I know what I think I'm seeing, but what I would really love is for you to go upstairs to see this neurosurgeon. And I would really like for him to look at your scans while I'm looking at your scans. And I would like for he and I to discuss what we're both seeing because your case is complicated and rare. So I want to make sure someone else is seeing what I'm seeing." So we did that, and the neurosurgeon said, "Yeah, I." So what they came to the conclusion of was every time I was moving my neck up and down, my vertebrae were sliding.
Oh,
The
wow.
My C6, C7 vertebrae were unstable. So like right at the base of my neck. So they were unstable. So every time I move my neck, the vertebrae are slipping because the disc has deteriorated and ruptured. And it was causing cervical vertigo and all kinds of other symptoms. That was just one piece of the puzzle. The other thing that was happening and that they thought might be happening, but we needed more testing to confirm, was that I had a centralized rupture in my spine. So normally when somebody ruptures a disc in their spine, they get an MRI laying down and it spills out to the left side or the right side. And they're like, "Oh, there it is." Mine was a centralized rupture. So it it burst straight back. And then for all the years that it was there and I was being gaslit, it was calcifying. These bone cells were calcifying and hardening, and it had grown into a mass that was like invading the spaces in between my vertebrae and crushing my spinal cord, and my spinal cord was deformed.
Oh, wow.
So talk about validation when I
Yeah.
finally found that out. But unfortunately, in addition to all of that, I had severe endometriosis that so I had 4 spinal surgeries in 11 months, and then a year later I had 2 abdominal surgeries or medically necessary hysterectomy. That's another case of medical gaslighting. Most women who have endometriosis don't really have it. The only way to diagnose it for certain is to do an exploratory lapidectomy surgery. And how many insurance companies want to pay for exploratory surgery?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
most women who have it don't know they have it. And in my case, the uterine tissue was spilling out of my uterus and had filled my pelvis and was invading my spinal column and SI joints and had attached itself to like my sciatic nerve and like glute muscles and stuff. So the damage that was done is permanent. So I have a spinal cord stimulator that helps with the pain in my left leg because I have chronic sciatica essentially. Piriformis syndrome is like your sciatic nerve is being hinged by your glute muscles.
Wow.
And uh, without my spinal cord stimulator implant, my pain in my left leg would be 10 out of 10, 24 hours a day.
Wow.
And it was for years before I got it. So I have that to help with the pain in my leg. And then I ended up also getting a thoracolumbar fusion from T10 to L2. It's a really rare surgery. Doctors don't like to mess with the thoracic spine because your thoracic spine is the only part of your spine that's immobile and it's protecting all of your organs. So they don't want to have to go in there unless it's like cancer, like a tumor or something. And and they were very honest with me about that. And I ended up having like a real life Doogie Howser surgeon that I thank God for every day. That was one of the only who could do a direct approach to fix this. So during surgery, I laid on my stomach and he went directly through my back to my spine. But um, m- most, a lot of people who have that surgery have to go through laying on a table on their side and having what they call a shark bite incision, where they literally move your organs, they
Yeah.
deflate your lungs, they
Wow.
move everything out of the way to get to your spine. And he was one of a handful of surgeons who could do it the way he did it. So I'm so thankful for that because I think it would have been a much more difficult recovery. And I don't think I would be where I'm at today if I had had to have the old way. I might not have made it out alive. I don't
Yeah.
know. No?
That's a great point. And your term medical gaslighting, I think, since a lot of people that I've had on the podcast are more from the limb loss community, but I'm certainly expanding to other communities like yours. And I thank you so much for being on the
Uh,
podcast. I think most of the people that are listening, they've gone through some of that themselves, which I've always thought about it like from the advocacy standpoint. Kind of a hard word suddenly for me. I don't know why, but but when you think of medical gas, because the way you put it, it just makes sense completely. But what would your definition of medical gaslighting be from your experience?
So I think I defined it the first time in 2018. I wrote my first ever published and paid article about women living with severe and chronic pain. It was like February or March. It was early 2018. And I was trying to explain what had been happening to me. And I was like, there's no name for this. There's no like term that anybody can reach for
Yeah,
to recognize this. And I was like, it's literally like they're gaslighting me about my own symptoms. And so that's how medical gaslighting came up. And to me, medical gaslighting, like usually when we think of gaslighting, we think of romantic relationships and one person trying to gaslight the other into believing that they're not really seeing or experiencing the behaviors that they are. The person gaslighting is trying to manipulate the victim and say, that's not that's not true, you're
yeah,
crazy, or something along those lines. So to me, medical gaslighting is when medical professionals are telling patients things like, well, you can't be experiencing those symptoms because I don't see anything on your scans, or there's no way that your pain is that bad if you're not willing to take this medication, or we've done 3 MRIs. There's nothing wrong that should be causing these problems. Or, you know, it's a medical professional making a patient feel like they're crazy or that they don't really need the treatment or the test or the assistive device that they need. And I I got a double whammy. It was like I had medical gaslighting and legal gaslighting at the same time because my doctor, who was responsible for signing the paperwork saying that I couldn't work, for FMLA and things like that, was like, he didn't understand the difference between FMLA and Social Security. And so he refused to sign paperwork. I mean, it
oh
was just a
wow,
mess.
yeah,
It was a total mess. And so when I finally got to the point where I did book where I did apply for Social Security, it ended up being a 5.5 year battle, and I had to sue the federal government. It was like horrible. Um, so when someone is trying to convince you that you're not experiencing the pain or symptoms that you're telling them you're experiencing, that's medical gaslighting. And it's also ableism. And a lot of us with invisible disabilities internalize a lot of that ableism that's thrown at us. Because in our society, productivity equals value, right? And if I can't sit up, stand up, walk, if I can only lay on a couch 24 hours a day or a bed, and you know, I can't physically be out in the world producing, then I have no value to a lot of people in our society. And
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
oh no, go ahead.
I was just going to ask from your experience, and I don't know if you learned what you learned through having to navigate both of those gaslighting experiences. What would you give, what kind of guidance would you give someone who may be going through the same thing right now?
Yeah, I would say don't be afraid to fire your doctor. Don't be afraid to ask questions. I think women a lot of times think we're supposed to be like polite and just like follow orders. Medical gaslighting, and I want to be clear, it does happen to everyone, but statistically, women and especially women of color are most often um on the receiving end of the gaslighting. It's much more prevalent as a woman than a male. Um, as far as what the research shows so far, which I'm a data person, so I go off the data. But it we have this like be polite and like sugar spice, all things nice, don't if you're if you're insistent, you're a bitch. You're not being feminine, you're being masculine. There's so many rules attached to how we as women are supposed to interact with all these different authority figures in our life.
Yeah, yeah,
And so I think we're afraid to question doctors. I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, who I saw as like legitimate authority figures were like judges, doctors, teachers, uh besides your parents. I
yeah,
mean, that those were, and for my friends, certainly their priest or rabbi, or their, whoever, whatever their religion was. I had a lot, we were a various mix of friends. It was really cool. But it we were taught that those people are people you trust and they're authority figures.
yeah.
So we don't like to question them, but you have to, because here's the thing. There's a saying that you don't drown by falling in the water, you drown by staying there. And as a patient and as an advocate for yourself, no one is coming to save you. You have to fight to get back up to the surface of the water and take a breath and advocate yourself, because no one is coming to save you. And we're all responsible for our own vitality.
Yeah.
I'm not responsible for the medical professionals who gaslit me. I'm not responsible for the people in my life who abused me. I'm not responsible for a lot of things that went on around me and to me. But I am responsible for my own continued vitality. And you have to be your own best advocate as a patient, which means journaling things, being willing to try things that the doctor suggests, even if you think it's going to be bullshit. Sorry,
No, go
my
ahead.
bad.
That's
Even if
okay.
you think, even if you think it's woo nonsense, like, oh, my diet's not going to help me. Even if you think it, just do it. Try it. Try everything. Be willing to try everything to help yourself and record that. There's a lot of apps now for people living with chronic invisible disabilities that help you track your symptoms daily and how that might relate to what you ate that day and how it might relate to the weather and the
Wow.
humidity. And it tracks all these different, they track all these different variables, so you can keep track of how your body is doing, hopefully. And I've really found those to be incredibly helpful. Flare down was one I used for a couple years when I was trying to get the doctors. I was trying to get enough data to give the doctors to be like, look, I've done all the things. I did everything you said. Perfect score on my homework. Still won't feel better. So help. Um, and now I use apps like there's this app called Gentler Street because for the rest of my life, I'm going to be a spine patient that has to work on rehabbing her spine. And it's a degenerative, I have a degenerative disease in my discs, and I have a genetic connective tissue disorder. So it's not going to get like better.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
but I can make my quality of life as good as possible. And so that's what I strive to do. So, fire doctors if you need to, talk to other people. A lot of our friends have experienced things that we have also experienced, but nobody knows it because we're all walking around in our own head thinking we're crazy. And
Hmm.
like, if it wasn't for the online spoonie community and all of the women in my life who are willing to talk openly, including myself, who are willing to talk openly about our experiences, our symptoms, our diagnoses, how those diagnoses play into our lives. Without that, people continue to suffer. So I do take it as my responsibility to help make others aware of these things. So, because I believe that awareness is the key to fixing anything, or, nothing gets fixed if nobody knows about it. You have to take the things that happen in the dark and bring them into the light. So I take it really seriously, sharing my story and being an open book, and thank God for the women in the Sweeney community that I've built over the last several years because they've helped me figure out some of my like mysteries. That's how I decided to get tested for connective tissue disorders, and we found out that I do in fact have them, and now my whole family is aware, and that's we didn't have that in previous generations. Like nobody my mom's age talked about their health.
Yeah.
Like that was like,
Yeah.
and people sometimes are like, you share too much. And I'm like, no, like there is no such thing as sharing too much because people need to know so they don't feel alone.
And one of the ways you share is through your website. I want to make sure that since if people may just be listening, how do people
Yeah.
find you? I'd like people to know.
Um, so sometimes I do speaking engagements. I'll be at the Michigan State Police headquarters on February 4th talking about neurodivergence and like how police might better interface with people with invisible disabilities and neurodivergence. I'm really excited about that. They reached out to me to ask me to come do that, and
That's awesome.
it makes me
Congratulations.
feel good that the police that state police are thinking about these things and specifically how to be better staff, colleagues, and public servants in relation to invisible disabilities. So that's really cool. But yeah, I have a website, kellyjmendenhall.com. And on that is the Affordable Art Revolution store. I started the Affordable Art Revolution with a mission to spread love and joy to Spoonies everywhere through art and the written word, and to make handcrafted goods and artisan crafts and art more accessible to people with disabilities. So everything in my store is pay what you can or name your price. And and it means just that.
Yeah.
There's no wrong answer. It's about giving what is comfortable for each individual. And if that's a couple of dollars, that's fine. Um Hard to talk a lot of my like my in the bot like I'm very different than a lot of my family, so it's hard to convince some of them of this business model, right? It's definitely like a social entrepreneurial thing, but uh everything is pay what you can or name your own price unless it's a custom commission. So I'm an embroidery artist and I specialize in heirloom Christmas stockings and ornaments and things. That have been around for 150 years.
Yeah.
My great grandma used to make them, and that's why I wanted to make them. And so I started off making them for nieces and nephews, but in all the years, sorry, Beyonce running in and out between
Ah,
jobs.
that's okay.
Um, uh, so these stockings and ornaments that I make, it's a really special community of women because this is all hand sewed piece by piece, hand beaded, sequins. Like, I mean, it's really intricate work. Um, but my Christmas stocking every year when I would get to hang it or like touch it, it was just like my favorite thing. Like it made Christmas morning
Yeah.
even more magical.
Yeah.
And I used to remember, like, I'd rub my fingers over the sequins just to feel it. And like, I remember thinking, I wonder if Santa thinks my stocking is like extra cool because he's on it, like, and so my great grandma Mabel started that. She made stockings for all of her grandchildren and great grandchildren until she passed. And so
Mm.
I decided to pick that up. And it was only about 6 months before I lost my ability to walk that I picked up the hobby. So all those years, I was stitching beauty in the midst of all of this brutality and
Mm.
ugliness and pain.
Mm-hmm.
That was my escape from it. That was what kept me going. And it's a very therapeutic when you're creating whatever your thing is that you're creating, when you're in the zone, it's so therapeutic and cathartic. And I want more people my age and younger to feel like embroidery isn't just for old ladies. And I want to help other people access art and creativity in a way that can help them cope with chronic pain, invisible illness, mental health, anything. Art saves lives. And I know that because it saved mine. And art was supposed to be something that was for the common people and for everyone, right? Like art started out as like everyone should experience art. And now they've taken it out of the schools and it becomes more and more and more of this elitist thing that only
Yeah.
certain people can access. And I don't like it. So I always say accessibility turns me on. And like, I want more people to have access to creating things that help heal them. And for me, writing and stitching are the two most like healing things I can do. And if I can do it in a way that helps other people and brings other people joy in dark moments,
Yeah.
like what what better way could I dream of to spend my days? I'm never going to be back in a traditional office setting, and I don't want to be anyway. I hated it. I'm neurodivergent. I didn't know I was autistic and ADD. It's no wonder I never got along with my bosses because I hate injustice.
Yeah.
I hate injustice and I hate illogical things. And like, I don't ever want to go back to that. In some ways, my back is the greatest gift that could have been given to me because it reconnected me with my authentic, like artistic, creative self which was the person I had buried for years and years out
Yeah.
of survival.
Yeah.
Like so it, and I think of my disabilities as my superpowers because
I love
I
it.
have an even greater capacity for empathy and compassion and love and understanding that literally everyone is going through something at any moment that we have no idea about. So like my patience is way better. I
Yeah.
don't, if I know I have to go somewhere, oh, here's a quick tip. If you're
Please.
going to the doctors and you feel like crap, I'm talking especially to women or people who like wear a lot of makeup and stuff. Don't go looking like crap. It makes a there in the studies it shows that women who are aesthetically more pleasing
Wow.
are even more likely to have it take longer to get treated. So we really have to stop masking. We're so used to masking and like everybody wants to act like everything's okay at all times. And we ask how you doing, but nobody wants the real answer, right? And we got to get back to talking. Where did community go?
Wow.
And stitching circles and quilting circles used to be how women communicated and shared stories and filled each other in on the church families or the town gossip or like whatever was going on with such and such. And it's how they came together to decide to do things in the community. And like, um, I like to create community around art and commonality and love
Yeah.
because there's just so much divisiveness and like fake divisiveness. Like everybody it's like this manufactured,
Yeah.
divisiveness of like trying to shut us all off from each other and alienate us from each other and forget that we have commonalities.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm like that revolutionary who's like, hell no, like we're not doing that.
And
And
that's the
artists,
affordable art revolution. I love that
yeah,
term too. Did you come up with that term?
yeah, yeah.
That's fantastic. It's linked off your
I,
website. So
yeah.
go to that website again. What is that URL again? I want to make sure people know that and can go to it.
KellyJMendenhall.com.
You,
So my name is really long and sounds complicated, but it's not. It's
no.
three little words, one big last name. So it's just Mendenhall.
Well,
And
I was telling you earlier when it's Mendenhall, right? And you go, of course, yes. But I've messed up people's names on this podcast, and that's the worst thing I can do. So thank you. It is easy. So please go to that website. And another thing that's linked off that website is your book that came out, I believe, in 2019, Skin in the Game: The Stories My Tattoos Tell. What is that about?
well, it's a memoir. So I write my life story up to 2018 through the stories behind my tattoo collection. So for anybody who's watching, I'm wearing a sweater right now, but I'm very heavily tattooed. I have this whole sleeve, and then I have most of this arm tattooed. And I have like a chest plate that goes from shoulder to shoulder. Oh, I have tattoos, but they all tell a story. For me, tattoos are a therapeutic way of memorializing events or people or periods of my life that are lost or that I need to put away. And so a lot of my tattoos are memorial pieces for people who've passed away or I I, I have the sleeve on my right arm is mostly family and friends. And it's in the neo-traditional style with some of the Sailor Jerry stuff because my dad was in the Navy. And I didn't get to know my dad a whole lot, but he was in the Navy in the 50s. And that picture, the portrait I have on my arm is his picture from the 50s when he actually got arrested. That's a whole nother story. But uh I went through a lot in my life, and I want people to know that you can go through a lot and you can experience a lot of pain, physical, emotional, psychological, whatever. It doesn't have to be the end of their story. And that's like my biggest message. Like your diagnosis or diagnoses don't have to be the end of your story. I'm a spinal fusion patient who could not walk 3 miles at once before surgery. I can now take my dog if it's nice enough and not freezing. I can take my dog and walk 3 miles for no reason. Like it took years to get to this point, but I didn't give up because I'm responsible for my own vitality. And I refused to let the end of my story, I refused to give up and let them win. Like to me, my survival is like the most punk rock F you I can give to all those doctors who caused me to become permanently disabled and go through the financial destitution and all that. My survival is the greatest revenge. And I've had people ask, why don't you sue? And it's like, because I don't want to give them any more of my life. And they would take years and years and years of my life if I ever saw a dime.
Wow.
Um, so the book starts instead of going chronologically from like the moment I'm born until the time in 2018 when it ends, I tell the stories in chronological order of the tattoos that I got. So my first tattoo, second tattoo, and so uh in that book, I talk about grief and trauma, losing my dad at a young age, um, dealing with my stepbrothers and their shenanigans, uh, abusive and toxic romantic relationships, the ways that I acted out as a teen, which are not like great. Like, I mean, I really bare my soul, and I self-deprecating humor helps me cope too.
Yeah.
A gallows humor, I think, is really important for this life.
Yep. I
But
agree.
it's not all pretty.
Yeah.
Not all the choices I made were good choices. And I acted out sexually. I acted out using drugs and alcohol at a young age. My mom was not aware of how bad it was. I talk about all those things, but then I talk about, also like, uh, I like, I graduated high school a year early, and what going through college and why I did pursued my nonprofit career. And I tell the stories of friends that I lost, that passed away who I had tattoos for. I talk about my abortion, my pregnancy and abortion at age 28, which is also not an easy thing to be honest with the world about, because um the media, I believe, and a lot of politicians want me to feel that a lot of people would literally like kill me or jail me if they could at any second, because I'm honest about having had an abortion. I don't think that's true, because most of the people who read my book, even people who are staunchly pro life, have given me really good feedback. Like, thank you for writing about that, because
Yeah.
I needed to understand. Or other women who were hiding in shame reached out and said, thank you for making me feel less alone and more normal. And so I talk about some really tough things, and I talk about the medical gaslighting and the journey that led me up to getting my spinal cord stimulator implant. So when the book ends, I didn't know yet.
Yeah.
My book came out on June 1st of 2019, and it was June 5th or 6th of 2019 that I found out about what was happening in my spine. And they said, stop exercising immediately, stop doing
Wow.
every, like, because I was
Wow.
literally on the elliptical, like,
Wow.
because I was still doing rehab, trying to do physical therapy and everything. I was doing everything I could to keep myself moving. You
Yeah.
know, a body in motion stays in motion, and when you stop for too long, it's dangerous. So, they literally called me while I was like on an elliptical, and they're like, "You got to stop everything." So the book, I need to write the second book now. I need to write follow up.
Yeah.
Um, my friend Joey is my tattoo artist in Michigan, and he did a lot of the tattoos that I have when we were younger. We've known each other since we were 16. And I've talked to him, and I actually want to do like a photorealistic. He calls it my Terminator tattoo. I want to do a photorealistic like x-ray of my spine so that people can see what the hardware and stuff like looks like in there. But I wanted to have like embroidered flowers and things around the edges and in my ribs and stuff to signify how stitching and sewing saved my life, um and continue to do so. So um
Well, you were
yeah,
talking about the feedback that you get on the book, and I looked at it's on
yeah,
Amazon, by the way, and it's very
yeah,
well reviewed. We'll have a link to it in the description, obviously, but it's on your website, as I said.
yeah,
So
yep.
yeah, very good. And as you
And
look, go ahead. I'm sorry.
oh, I was gonna say, for those who are maybe don't want the paperback or the ebook experience, there is on my website, I turned my book into a podcast. So it's like a live author reading with me reading my book.
That's
And there's
awesome.
9 episodes. I think it's like $3.99, and you get lifetime downloads. So
That is
yeah.
awesome. That, along with your affordable art revolution, I mean, people got to go support that too at kellyjmendenhall.com. So
Yeah.
make sure they do that. But as you look forward now to where you're at, and I think I'm going to just say this, Kelly, not only this our recording of the podcast, but we had a 15, 20 minute
Yeah.
pre-conversation that I thoroughly enjoyed. So I want to have you back on because I know there's a lot more to this story, but I want to be cognizant of your time. But my last question for this particular episode is, as you look forward and looking at what you want to continue to accomplish in your life, what are you looking forward to as you move forward?
Well, this year's in my personal growth bank, this year should be the year I get to become a homeowner. And we've been working
Congratulations.
toward that for years. My partner Jeff and I, and it's a really big deal because I thought I was never going to be able to own a home because
That's
I was
awesome.
disabled.
Awesome.
Um, and I would love to come talk to your audience about the mortgage program that is available for people who are living on Social Security disability, that helps keep disabled people out of slums. It is called the USDA Rural Development Loan, and they are mortgage loans. Either the applicant or the co-applicant must be disabled and receiving Social Security and bad financial position. These mortgage programs are out there to keep disabled people out of slums, but nobody knows about them. So we are in the process of going through the application and everything. And basically, what it is it's kind of like subsidized rent, but on a mortgage. So because I'm permanently and totally disabled, they will like subsidize part of the mortgage payment so that it's not as hard on Jeff to support our family and it keeps us in a safe place. Right now, the apartment we live in is completely inaccessible for me, and it's painful. So
Yeah.
we're really excited, and we've worked really hard for it. And like, I'm really excited because the realtor and broker I'm working with are like, the realtor is an autoimmune spoonie. So like, when we talk, and I told her I want to help other disabled people access these programs, she's like, "That's what I want to do." So hopefully we'll be teaming up to help get disabled people in homes this year. And I want to
Nice.
start launching my virtual, like my online stitching classes on my website. I'm doing more free tutorials and posting blogs and stuff like that. I have a chronically creative blog, which has a Facebook community attached to it. And it's all people with chronic illness or disabilities who are, creative and doing things. So uh, I just want to grow that community more, and I would love to create art fairs specifically for
Wow.
people with disabilities
Wow.
to be vendors.
Yeah.
So taking away the things like $700 application fees and taking away things like the requirement that you have to be there for all 12 hours of the day or you can't be there at all, because disabled people's bodies should not have to endure those things to be part of these events, right? So I really, really like, that's my big dream, is making accessible art events for people with disabilities.
Well, I see nothing but success as you move forward. I know all this is going to happen because you've already navigated, I think, probably the toughest part of your life. Everything else you're going to do is continue down the path that you started out with when you wanted to continue looking at the underserved
Yeah,
communities. You're still doing it, and
I am
but you're doing it under your
on a
own
great scale.
direction. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
but you're doing it yourself, and I think the sky's the limit for you. And I just thank you so much, Kelly, for taking your time to be on the We're Not Stumped podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed talking to you, and I can't wait to talk more. There's so much more we can talk about.
We're going to do more. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the We're Not Stumped podcast. If you'd like to be a guest on the We're Not Stumped podcast, please go to we'renotstumped.com and fill out the form. But if nothing else, please like, share, and subscribe. But if you're going to do one of those three, please share it. There's so many people out there that need to hear these stories, the great stories of the incredible people that are on this podcast. So do me a favor. Please like, share, or subscribe. Thank you.